Thank you for watching the Sustainability Chat. The Sustainability Institute is a 501c3 not-for-profit organization located in La Crosse, Wisconsin. Our mission is to catalyze sustainable action in the Seven Rivers region through educating about local sustainability issues and solutions, advocating for climate and sustainable action, connecting like-minded organizations and people to each other, and inspiring a positive vision for a sustainable future. We hope you check out all of our programs and events, like our Sustainability Chats, Green Goose Chase, Earth Fair, and the Inspiring Sustainability Awards. The Sustainability Institute programs and operations could not happen without our generous donating members. We want to thank them all today. If you find what we do meaningful, please consider donating and becoming a member by heading to our website, sustaininstitute.com. Once there, click on the Donate and Become a Member button on the top of the page. Support at any level is greatly appreciated, and your donation is tax deductible. Now on to today's Sustainability Chat about complete streets, designing safe streets for everyone, with Jenna Dinkel, Associate Planner for the City of La Crosse, and Travis Key, Associate Transportation Planner for La Crosse County.
Hi, and welcome to another edition of Sustainability Chats brought to you by the Sustainability Institute. We are a 501c3 organization located in La Crosse, Wisconsin, with a mission of catalyzing sustainable action in the Seven Rivers region. Here at the Sustainability Institute, we believe sustainability is about building thriving, resilient, and just communities. And yes, that means having clean air and clean water, but thriving also encompasses a lot of other things like access to healthcare and having good jobs and responsive government, and thinking about how we design our communities to be safe and inclusive and resilient. So today, we are really excited to be joined by Jenna Dinkel, the Associate Planner for the City of La Crosse, and Travis Key, who's the Associate Transportation Planner for the County of La Crosse. And really, these two are doing so much to help plan for our community to be safe, resilient, and inclusive. Particularly, they are just doing some incredible things, helping us rethink how we can design our streets for mobility of all sorts, not just cars, but all sorts of mobility. And when we do that, we increase the ability for all of us to thrive. So with that, I want to bring on Travis and Jenna, and they are going to be talking to you about what they do as planners, but particularly with streets. So Travis and Jenna, welcome and take it away.
Thanks, Casey. As he said, I'm Jenna Dinkel. I work for the City of La Crosse, and I'm joined by Travis Key. He works for the Metropolitan Planning Organization, and we are both planners talking today about designing safe streets for everyone. So, when we talk about planning, urban planning can be a bit of an abstract topic. So some of the questions you might ask yourself that relate to planning are, what's that new development that's going in? Why does this street feel so dangerous? I wish cars would stop for me when I'm trying to cross this street. And why are they tearing that cool building down? Those are all questions that you might ask yourself while you're walking around either La Crosse or other communities. And they all relate to different sections of urban planning, whether it be economic development, heritage preservation, and what we're here to talk about today, transportation. So, as we talk about transportation, it's important to look at the history and how we got here. So, the intent of roads is something that we don't often think about, but they've been around for 8,000 years plus. And for a majority of that time, they were used by human traffic and animal traffic. And for 7,900 years, that was a majority of human travel, whether it be from point A to point B, using roads to carry goods, and for trade and commerce. But within the last 100 years, we've seen a shift toward a majority use of vehicle traffic. When vehicle traffic and multimodal traffic first came about, we took a bit of a multimodal approach. There's three images on the screen, and one of them shows a map of Wisconsin and the interconnectedness of our railroad system in the late 1800s. In addition to that, we used to use trolley cars, horse and buggy, bicycles, and our own 2 feet to get around. And as these new ways of transportation were being introduced, we really took a multimodal approach. We saw bicyclists on the street, along with a horse and buggy and a trolley car, and loads of people walking on the sidewalks and milling around the street as well. So the question comes, how did we get here? We see traffic jams, road closures, and traffic deaths on the rise in Wisconsin. So how did we get from 100 years ago, a multimodal approach, to where we're at today, with car dependency? Many people have to rely on cars to get around, to get to jobs, to get to groceries, and to get to entertainment. So a lot of this happened with intention, and it was heavily lobbied and heavy advertising and the selling of the American dream. So these are some ads from the 1940s and 1950s that really are driving home the idea of car ownership. Um, Two of them are displaying the need for two cars. It's a two Ford garage, a second car for the family, even at a time where there maybe was only one adult working in the household. In addition to that, it's selling the dream wagon, or if this car doesn't excite you, check your pulse, you might be dead. If there's someone who is not interested in cars, or it's not their dream to own a car, then something's wrong with them, and they might be dead. So there was a lot of intention behind the advertising and lobbying that got us to where we're at today. So starting in 1908, there was the first production of the Ford Model T. And by 1924, there were 16 million cars on American roadways, but it still wasn't the main use of transportation. Uh, the image here is from downtown La Crosse in 1920, and we still see that multimodal approach in La Crosse. There's cars on the roadways, the streetcar is going, there's multiple bicyclists on the roadways, and the sidewalks are lined with pedestrians. Um, and so we're still seeing the streets being used by everyone. And what's important to note here as well is there are people in the distance crossing in the middle of the street, and people kind of meandering around, still in the street a little bit. After that, in 1924, the Los Angeles Traffic Commission changed the tune of how our streets operate. There was an ordinance that was commissioned by a car salesman that the Traffic Commission passed, and it started to dictate the way that our roadways were used, and that our roadways were primarily intended for the use of cars, which up until 1924 was a bit of a abstract concept. Our cars were not intended necessarily for roadways, as roadways had been around for thousands of years and used by other modes of transportation. Um, but this ordinance reinforced that our roadways were primarily meant to be used by cars. And one of the specific things that this ordinance did is it required that pedestrians be crossing in the designated crosswalk areas. After the Los Angeles Traffic Commission and later their council adopted this ordinance, 23 cities adopted the ordinance, and Wisconsin was one of three states to adopt it into state law by 1930. And the image on the left shows 1935 in downtown La Crosse, and it shows a bit of a different picture than 15 years earlier. Cars are parked up and down the street. There are very much less pedestrians on the sidewalks or milling about. There's no bicyclists, and the only place that people are walking is in the designated crosswalk area at the intersection. So this law is working in conjunction with the term jaywalking, which I'm sure that most people have heard of the term jaywalking, but maybe don't know its origin. It came from Kansas City in 1911, but started to become largely popularized after this ordinance was passed in LA and later developed in other cities and states. Jay was an early 20th century term for idiot, specifically deployed against rural people, meaning that people that were jaywalking didn't know the rules of the road. They were rural folks who didn't understand the city rules. And this advertising um, and terminology worked in conjunction with laws that were passed to offload the responsibility of drivers and put that responsibility on pedestrians to keep themselves safe in our roadways. And a lot happens after that between 1945 and 1956 to kind of develop our roadways into what we see today. In 1945, many soldiers are returning from war, and the GI Bill helps them get loans for purchasing houses. And this is where we start to see the rapid expansion of suburbia and later our highway system. With the GI Bill, a lot of our suburbs are being built up outside the city, and at the same time, banks in America are using redlining to determine where loans are given out. Redlining is a discriminatory practice used by banks, and it disallowed loans in certain areas in the city, in different cities. Often these areas were predominantly minority population, had a predominant minority population, and it was often in the inner cities that these loans were being denied in those red-lined areas. And this is where we start to see white flight out to suburbs. And with the rapid housing industry, uh, a lot of our houses in the suburbs are being built up, and any houses in predominantly minority areas are redlined, and that people cannot get loans to purchase them. Although uh, the suburbs are being built up and there's lots of housing, the jobs still exist in the city. And so people are having to travel from the suburbs to the city to work. And this is where the Federal Aid Highway Act of 1956 authorized the construction of 41,000 miles of interstate. And this created a perpetual um, system where we need the interstate to survive in our country. Uh, and so the 1956 photo of downtown La Crosse here shows kind of still paints this picture. We see cars lining the roadway. We see maybe one or two pedestrians. But it's a lot easier for people here now to park, go into the store they need, and then drive away versus having to walk to their destination and passing other businesses and possibly increasing commerce there. So, some examples of where roadways and cars have been prioritized over people and housing. Um, there's local examples of this. So, La Crosse streetcar, this service ended in 1945 and was replaced with city buses, but although it was popular, it was slowing traffic down. And the photos on the bottom of the screen show before and after of this same location, where We see a multimodal approach to streetcar, and we see some beautiful historic buildings in the background. It is now a large parking lot, where we see a prioritization of cars and parking, not just in the roadway, but also as a form of land use. In addition to this, many people are familiar with the proposed Marsh Highway that was proposed in 1996 by the Wisconsin Department of Transportation. This proposed highway would have destroyed 24 acres of wetland, 56 homes, and 16 businesses. And what is important to note about the highway is it would primarily serve those outside the city of La Crosse, but to the detriment of people in the city of La Crosse. So, to recap, streets used to serve a greater purpose before cars dominated the scene. There used to be a multimodal approach, and it was a space for pedestrians, bicyclists, streetcars, and not just cars. But now cities have been designed exclusively with cars in mind and exclusively with cars as the main mode of transportation. The image on the screen shows is an image of Atlanta, but is is not unique to Atlanta and is the blue highlighted building is the same building in both images, and what used to be likely a vibrant neighborhood and commercial node is now dominated by parking lots. And so not only our roadways, but also our land use has been dominated by the need for this form of transportation. And there's consequences to this beyond just suburbanization that Travis will get into here, but that leads to health impacts, safety impacts, and affordability impacts.
Thank you. So, of these impacts, perhaps the most acute consequence of car dependency and building our cities to support car infrastructure is traffic violence. Traffic fatalities continue to be a leading cause of death in the United States. And while traffic fatalities have trended downward over the last several decades, mostly due to more sophisticated enforcement and safety features in vehicles, there remains an enormous gap in safety in our transportation network. Since 2010, the number of pedestrians killed in vehicle crashes has increased by 75%. This rise in pedestrian traffic deaths is not something that other developed, wealthy nations across the globe is experiencing. So why in America? Why is the United States experiencing this sudden rise in pedestrian fatalities? The increase in danger for vulnerable road users like pedestrians and bicyclists can be in large part attributed to the ever increasing size of automobiles. This automobile arms race can be mostly attributed to a flawed EPA fuel efficiency regulation that closely ties fuel efficiency to the footprint of a vehicle. And auto manufacturers quickly realized that rather than invest in expensive research and development to make their fleet more efficient, they could instead make them wider, longer, and taller, and still meet the fuel efficiency standard. On the other side of that same coin, it turns out that Americans really love to drive big cars. And this is driven by a variety of cultural reasons, in addition to bigger is always better. But commonly cited is a reasoning that drivers feel safer driving larger vehicles. And while that may be true, it is also much less safe for everyone not in that larger vehicle. And this creates a downward spiral of, well, there are lots of big cars on the road, so I need to drive a big car too in order to feel safe on the road. And not only are vehicles getting larger and larger, but they're also needing to travel much farther. According to the National Census, the average one-way commute in 2006 was 25 minutes, but by 2024, that one-way commute distance had increased to 27.2 minutes. And now not only are vehicles getting larger, traveling farther, but they're also traveling much faster. In 1995, the National Maximum Speed Law, which set the national maximum speed limit, at 55 was repealed, unleashing a wild west of state set maximum speed limits ranging anywhere from 55 to 85 miles an hour today. In Wisconsin alone, just under 600 people die annually in automobile crashes. And I want to reiterate that these are absolutely preventable deaths. However, these are only the acute examples of vehicle dependency on public health. Vehicle dependency exacerbates sedentary lifestyles and negative cardiovascular outcomes associated with it. But because of how our cities have been designed to serve vehicle ownership and facilitate automobile dependency, most people are trapped by it, unable to consider or even afford alternatives. In addition to a comprehensive list of negative health outcomes, vehicle dependency drains so much more than that. In addition to enforcing sedentary lifestyles, vehicle dependency is also a primary driver behind things like anxiety, stress, and social isolation. It stands to reason that if you need to drive 25 minutes on your one-way commute every day, you probably live farther away from centers of activity, isolating you further. Financially, vehicle ownership costs a household approximately 18%, or just under 1/5 of its total income, the highest that it's ever been in history. Since 1975, the cost of car ownership has sextupled in cost. And to illustrate this, in 1975, and these numbers are adjusted for inflation, it cost approximately $2,000 to own, operate, and maintain a vehicle annually. But by 2024, that number was $12,000. So not only has the absolute value of our income being spent on vehicles ballooned, the total share of our income is also being eaten up by ever increasing costs. The cost to the environment is also so huge and globe spanning that it's become abstract to describe to most people. The consumption of space, extraction of resources, and emission of harmful pollution is only scratching the surface of the total ecological impact. According to the City of La Crosse Climate Action Plan, about 34% of all greenhouse gas emissions from our region are a result of the transportation sector, which is consistent with national and global figures which pin transportation emissions at about 30% of total greenhouse gas emissions. Now, at this point, I know that I've painted a very bleak picture of how our lives have been changed or affected as a result of car dependency and how our lived environments have been changed in service of it. But there are ways that we can try to minimize the negative effects of car dependency. Cities should be places that people live, not cars. And cities should also be places that people want to live in. There's a lot to unpack when we start talking about how to make our cities more livable places than just how we build our streets. But that's exactly what we're here to talk about today, is designing our streets. Complete Streets is a model for what a modern street can look like and do while staying true to the intention of roads, which is to move people and goods from point A to point B in a variety of ways. A complete street is complete because it considers all modes of transportation and creates dedicated space and seeks to reduce conflicts between them. Complete streets support lower costs of living by improving and empowering choice in transportation and lifestyle. I also want to highlight that in 2011, the City of La Crosse was the first community in Wisconsin to adopt a complete streets ordinance, which mandates that all new road constructions and reconstructions must consider all modes of transportation and make reasonable accommodations for them. This transformation is slowly taking hold in the United States, and while complete streets is not a new concept, there is over 100 years of inertia of designing our cities and building our cities and the infrastructure associated with it, associated with car dependence. Even locally, complete streets is beginning to transform what our streets can look like and who they can serve. Locally, the desire for safer, more complete streets is well documented in several planning documents and through engagement with the public. In 2024, the Bicycle and Pedestrian Master Plan was adopted. In 2025, the Long Range Transportation Plan Moving Ahead to 2055 was adopted. And most recently, and still ongoing, the Safe Streets for All Comprehensive Safety Action Plan is set to be adopted later this year in 2026. All of these plans have documented this desire and represent the first step to implementing real change. To highlight our most recent ongoing planning effort, I wanted to share a bit more about the Safe Streets for All program. Safe Streets for All is a federally funded grant program that empowers communities to address safety deficiencies from a holistic, systemic approach. And by systemic approach, I mean just not just addressing poorly designed infrastructure, but also developing policy strategies to address the entire system, ranging from safer people, safer vehicles, safer speeds, roads, and even enhancing post-crash care. This program represents a shift from state and federal legislators uh, towards investing in safety and just trying to go somewhere, getting behind the vehicle or walking on the sidewalk or crossing the street should not be the most dangerous thing that all of us do on a daily basis. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much for that. I mean, everything from the sort of the history of roads, which I think is it's something that most people don't think about, right? All the way to sort of how that's impacting us now and what we can do about it. So, I've got just a couple of questions. First of all, when it comes to like streets and car culture and all that, what is the biggest myth that you tend to like contend with, right, from the general public that about whether it's about complete streets or just about the importance of car culture? Like, what's some of the friction that you're running into?
I'll take a crack at it first, and then Jenna, if you want to hop in and maybe illustrate some more. I mean, there's so many myths. It's hard to pick one, but I think the first thing that comes to mind is a myth, and it's hard to dispel because it's so complicated. But this belief that, well, I pay to register my car, and I pay to put gas in my car, and I know there's a gas tax, and so by driving my car, I'm paying for the infrastructure and the roads to support this car infrastructure. So it's being paid for. And so why should other modes of transportation like bicyclists or pedestrians who want their fair share of the road, why should they get what I'm paying for, basically? But that's could not be farther from the truth in that the gas tax and the Highway Trust Fund, which is the federal transportation fund that funnels out to all the DOTs and funds most of our transportation projects, is the balance is pretty much negative. It's heavily subsidized. Our road infrastructure is subsidized by taxpayer dollars from other sources and not necessarily paid for completely by drivers themselves. And so that justification that drivers or car-brained people have that they have a right or like they justify that roads are for cars and cars only is misplaced.
I'll add a little bit to that, and I think that Travis brings up a good point, and I think that's why it's important to go into the history a bit as well, because our roadways were used by other modes of transportation for um, most of their history, and then it's only within that last 100 years that cars have kind of taken over. I think one of the things that we hear a lot as well is that the that like no one uses the bike infrastructure and that like Travis said, like cars have a right to the roadway, and that if someone else is getting something, then that means you're taking away from me. And I think that's something that we've talked about and has been talked about in other communities is can you live with it? Um, that that we're not usually, I don't think there's ever been a project that we're taking away car transportation. Like you are still able to drive your car through here. Um, and can you live with it? And the answer is typically yes, you can live with it. But if you are a vulnerable user on the roadway, such as a pedestrian, a bicyclist, sometimes those are instances where that might take their life if they don't have that infrastructure. And so it's one of those things, and like complete streets is a balancing act, and that's our goal is that we're not taking away from anyone. We're just trying to spread the wealth.
So speaking of complete streets, what's a project that's going on right now or maybe even just in the conceptual phases, right? That you're most excited about within the area?
Well, first thing that comes to mind, I know we already highlighted Second Street in our presentation, but Second Street is also getting an upgrade from what it is currently with just sort of, I'd say, semi-protected bike lanes, or they're still at grade with vehicle traffic, and there's plastic bollards that it's not a physical barrier between vehicles and cars. And if you go down Second Street, there's plenty of them that have been knocked down by cars already. But soon, I believe in the next 2 years, they're upgrading the Second Street cycle track to have a cement, like concrete barrier between bicyclists and traffic to sort of not just improve the comfort of bicyclists on the Second Street cycle track, but also to improve the physical protection and separation of vehicles and bicyclists. That one comes to mind first.
I can go.
Yeah, go ahead.
Um, I think one of the things that I'm excited for, and maybe it's because I'm a North Side resident as well, is Avon Street is currently, we're working on upgrades on Avon Street to complete that as a greenway and make it easier for traffic, but a easier for alternative modes of transportation to travel on. But in addition to that, we're seeing some major upgrades on the lacrosse major highways, so 35 and 53. And with that, Wisconsin Department of Transportation has done a really good job considering other modes of transportation. One of the biggest difficulties for someone traveling north of the train tracks on the north side to downtown or the south side is when the train blocks, and typically they block longer than they should. So, with that, the Wisconsin Department of Transportation is looking at increasing the uh, increasing the sidewalk width on the viaducts, which I think will just be a huge improvement for all modes of transportation. Hopefully, make it easier for north-south traffic. Both of those things working in conjunction to make it easier for north-south traffic on the north
Cool.
side.
Cool. I mean, I know in Europe, for example, where their cities were developing for hundreds of years before any US cities were developing. And so therefore they've got smaller roads, right? Roads that aren't designed for cars. And so we see, more bicycles and more streetcars and things like that. Much more multimodal, right? In many cities in Europe. I'm curious about where you think a good, like, what city or community is knocking this out of the park in the US? Whether that's close by, someplace that we can go visit and people can get a sense of like what this actually looks like when it's working well, or I'm just whether it's regionally or somewhere in the US, but who's really doing this work well?
I can start on that. And the one thing I think Travis and I toyed with as part of this presentation was including examples of European cities because they were not always the way they are now either. In the 1970s, there was a huge push in a lot of European, especially like the Netherlands, where car traffic was heavily introduced. And then, due to traffic deaths, there were huge protests and a strong desire to kind of flip the switch on the priority mode of transportation, which is how we got to, or how the Netherlands got to where they are today. Um, and so it's interesting to see that other countries and other cities abroad have really been able to shift their modes of transportation from car dominance to otherwise. But what I would say locally and regionally, I think that two examples that come to mind right away is State Street in Madison is a great example of a shared street and a community that has worked with the businesses to make a shared street work to allow for delivery times and to really reinvigorate some of that vibrancy on our street network. Another community that's nearby that is nationwide is known for their bicycle infrastructure is Minneapolis. Um, they have great infrastructure and not just great infrastructure, but great ways of maintaining that infrastructure and making it a good way to get around, regardless of snow or other elements.
And also, what, yeah, I mean, speaking of Madison, they just recently, I think last year, introduced their bus rapid transit system, which
Mm.
is really innovative, especially considering the city that is already well built or built up or developed. Introducing something like a light rail system can be prohibitively expensive for any mid-size or even smallish large city like Madison. And so by introducing dedicated bus lanes and priority signalization and introducing this bus rapid transit system, I think that is a great example of how a city that size can introduce like really just level up their transit system and really enable a car-free or car-light lifestyle. Um, Even further out, I've heard Paris is a European example of a city that really did go really deep into prioritizing car traffic and vehicle traffic in a lot of places, but somewhat in the last couple of decades, they've sort of reversed that and really started to reprioritize sharing the streets with other modes of active transportation, bicyclists and things like that.
So if we wanted to learn more about complete streets or about, multimodal transportation, do you have any good books or references or sites that you can send us to?
That's a good question. It's so open-ended. There's so many. Actually, I do have a book that I read recently. This book, Walkable Cities by Jeff Speck, is a great read. I think it's a great introduction to just sort of it's very holistic. I think it approaches it from lots of different angles, from transit to walkability, and sort of even taking into consideration the size of the community, like a mid-sized city, a small city, more urban or more rural areas that like, sometimes taking away street parking in downtown areas would actually be harmful to a smaller community where people are more spread out. Like you can't reconstruct a whole city overnight. And so it's a slow transition and sort of like what sort of treatments make the most sense for different kinds of communities, like, and the role that certain treatments play, like how streetcars are great pedestrian accelerators, but not necessarily a replacement for transit.
One of my go-to resources is actually someone who has a social media, and her name is Signed by Brit, and she's actually a Detroit urban planner, and she just posts really great short content about planning and kind of how we got to where we are in cities and how we can make cities better places. And she specifically focuses a lot on transportation. I think it's a great form of short content that is really attainable to everyone.
And what was that? Who's the person or who's the creator?
Her handle is signed by Brit.
Okay, cool. We'll check that out. Thanks. And one final question, how can our audience and anyone who's watching this support the work that you're doing? What's the best way for them to get more involved?
I think that there's a lot of ways to get involved always. We often have planning efforts going on, like at the Safe Streets for All um, grant program or the safety action plan that we're working on. And so anytime that there's surveys or we're trying to get community feedback, following along with those planning efforts. But at the same time, I think even if we don't have a plan going on, or if someone is biking on the Second Street cycle track and they are thinking to themselves, wow, this is such a great thing for our community. Tell your elected officials and tell the planning staff or the engineering staff that you think it is great because that's how we get more of those great pieces of infrastructure is by hearing that positive feedback. Oftentimes, when you look at the Google reviews of any restaurant, website, anything, it's when people have a negative experience. And the same thing goes for municipalities. So if you have positive experiences on our roadways or are happy to see a specific type of infrastructure, let people know that.
How about you,
Yeah.
Travis?
I mean, honestly, Jenna put it so well. Like, just stay engaged, like civically, like just participate civically. talk to your elected officials. They want to hear from you. They want to hear from their constituents. And yeah, like Jenna said, it's typically the people that come to public engagement meetings are, even if they are advocates for some of these, innovative infrastructure or active transportation, things like that, typically made up of the same like small group of people that are extremely engaged. And I think hearing from the silent majority is so important, and hearing from people that we don't hear from all the time, especially those that are, like Jenna said, disgruntled with the way things are. Even if it's just fine or pretty good, that's incredible feedback for us to hear, and is really important. And actually, I will do a plug. I just this week, the La Crosse Area Planning Committee opened up the survey for our regional transit development plan, which is looking at getting feedback and looking at making policy recommendations that we can then work with our transit providers like DriftLink, MTU, the ADRC, the Smart Bus, to really improve service and make it work better for our community.
Great. If you send us that link, we'll make sure that we can get
Yes.
that out to our out to the audience. So thank you so much, both Jenna and Travis. So thanks for sharing your expertise with us and your enthusiasm about complete streets and what we could be doing and what we are in the process of doing. Really, your work is important, and it's making La Crosse and making our region better for everyone. So thank you for taking the time to chat with us, and good luck with your work as you move forward.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
To stay connected with the Sustainability Institute and stay aware of upcoming events, head on over to our website to join our mailing list. Once again, we want to thank you for watching this Sustainability Chat. We hope to see you soon.